Imagine if every map you've ever used to navigate your city was just fundamentally wrong.
Right, like not just slightly outdated.
Exactly. Not just missing a new coffee shop or a street sign, but based on a completely fabricated geometry.
Oh, that would be a nightmare.
Right. If you followed those maps, you would constantly find yourself, walking into brick walls, just totally confused about why the territory didn't match the paper in your hands.
And, well, according to a pretty groundbreaking group of researchers, that is exactly what's happening right now with our understanding of the global economy.
Yeah, the textbooks and the models we use to make sense of money, markets, and growth, they're operating on a seriously flawed assumption. So welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're giving you a shortcut to understanding the invisible forces, basically science, technology, and innovation, that are actively rewriting the rules of the world you live in. And we're going to talk about why those old maps are failing us,
Yeah, and we're pulling our insights today from a really detailed review by Helen Borges. She analyzed this massive foundational book.
which we should probably name, right?
Yes, it's titled Economia da Ciencia, Tecnologia e Inovação, Fundamentos Teóricos y Economia Global.
A heavy hitter.
Definitely. And specifically, we're looking at the expanded second edition, which was published in 2020. This text tackles the massive disconnect between how economists model the world and, well, how technology actually changes it.
And what I think makes this source so vital for you listening today is its origin. I mean, we are stepping completely outside that usual Silicon Valley myth-making bubble.
Oh, absolutely.
This book was organized by a powerhouse team of researchers from CETAPLAR, which is at the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil.
Yeah, it includes scholars like Marcia Sequeira Rapini, Janina Ruffoni, Leandro Alves Silva, and Eduardo da Mata y Albuquerque.
Right. So the mission for us today isn't just to talk about cool new gadgets.
Yeah.
We want to look at the actual mechanics behind innovation through this deeply researched Brazilian perspective.
And fill a pretty huge gap in the literature while we're at it.
Exactly. And the biggest takeaway from the opening of this book is that mainstream economics, what's known in academia as neoclassical economics, is currently suffering from a massive identity crisis.
A really deep one, yeah. The root of this crisis is basically a total detachment from reality.
Wait, how so? Like they're just ignoring what's happening.
Sort of, yeah. Mainstream economics has developed this intense obsession with mathematical abstraction. It loves clean, elegant equations.
Oh, I see.
And at the absolute center of all those equations is the concept of equilibrium. The traditional view just assumes that markets naturally seek a state of perfect balance and rest.
Right. So like the models are built on this idea that supply will always gracefully meet demand.
Exactly. Prices will stabilize, and the whole system will eventually settle into a neat, predictable harmony.
Which sounds lovely, but
But heterodox economists, the scholars who are thinking outside this mainstream tradition, they argue that this hyper-focus on mathematical formalization has completely replaced any substantive analysis of how the real world actually operates.
okay, let's unpack this for a second.
Mm.
If you model the economy as a system that's constantly seeking rest, you are essentially treating the market like a perfectly staged static photograph.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, like everyone is smiling, not a single hair is out of place, and everything is perfectly balanced. But I mean, I have to ask you and the listener, does the real world ever actually sit in perfect balance?
Never. Anyone who watches technology or runs a business knows that.
Right. So the alternative presented in the text is called evolutionary economics.
Yes.
So if traditional economics is that static photograph, evolutionary economics treats the market like a wild, living ecosystem. Things are constantly mutating, competing, and disrupting the environment.
And what's fascinating here is how literal that biological metaphor really is.
Really?
Yeah. Evolutionary economics actively draws its systemic, holistic viewpoints from the natural sciences. It basically abandons the physics envy of those clean equations and instead looks at biology.
That makes so much more sense.
Right. It roots itself in the pioneering work of thinkers like Thorstein Veblen, the American institutionalists, and, of course, Joseph Schumpeter.
Schumpeter is a big name in this space.
Huge! Instead of reducing the economy to static numbers and seeking this mythical equilibrium, the evolutionary approach focuses entirely on dynamics.
So it's looking at the messy stuff.
Exactly. It looks at the constant, messy churn of technological innovations and the institutional changes that inevitably follow them. In this framework, change, disruption, and disequilibrium are not errors in the system. They literally are the system.
I love that because, I mean, When a massive new technology drops, like, say, the internet or the first personal computers, it doesn't just neatly slot into an existing supply and demand curve to create
Yeah,
balance.
it shatters the curve.
Totally shatters it. It destroys legacy industries, it creates entirely new ones out of thin air, and throws everything into chaos for decades.
And a static model simply cannot compute that level of disruption.
It really can't. The evolutionary approach seems to arise directly from just, you know, looking out the window and observing how real technological change actually happens.
Which shows a total incompatibility with the idea of a quiet, balanced market. And the empirical studies back that up completely.
They do.
Oh, yeah. When you observe the actual history of industrial progress, it is just a history of profound disequilibrium. The evolutionary framework is specifically designed to handle that continuous instability.
Right.
It acknowledges that firms are not all identical, perfectly rational actors. They have different capabilities, they experiment with different innovations.
And the market acts as a selection mechanism.
Exactly like natural selection. It rewards the innovations that adapt best to the environment.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate here for a minute.
Sure.
If this wild evolutionary ecosystem model is so obviously superior to the static math of the traditionalists, those traditionalists should have vanished by now, right?
You would think so.
Yeah, I mean, the better theory should win. So why are the old static models still running the economics departments and dictating public policy?
Well, the review is actually very transparent about this hurdle. Changing a scientific paradigm isn't just about who possesses the most logical argument or the most accurate model.
Right, it's humans we're talking about.
Exactly. It's a messy, deeply human, and highly political process. Academic power structures and ideological differences play an enormous role here.
If I can imagine.
You have generations of influential economists whose entire careers, their tenure, their published papers, and their institutional prestige are built entirely on these mathematical equilibrium models.
So the resistance to abandoning that framework is massive.
Massive.
Because they aren't going to just pack up their offices and admit their life's work was based on a flawed premise.
Exactly. No one wants to do that.
Plus, I imagine evolutionary economics isn't the only alternative theory trying to crash the gates of the mainstream.
Not at all. There is a very wide spectrum of heterodox theories out there, and they're all criticizing traditional reductionism and the equilibrium concept from different angles.
So it's a crowded field.
Very crowded. The evolutionary approach is fighting a multi-front war. It has to dethrone the mainstream while simultaneously competing with other alternative theories for attention and funding.
Wow, that's a tough spot to be in.
And the text highlights an even more significant internal vulnerability.
What's that?
Evolutionary economists themselves cannot agree on a single unified definition of what evolutionary economics actually is.
Wait, seriously?
Seriously.
So they are criticizing traditional models for being completely out of touch with reality, but their own camp doesn't even have a cohesive research program.
Yeah, that's a very fair pushback, and it's a major limitation the text points out.
I mean, if you don't have a unified flag to fly, it seems almost impossible to coordinate a paradigm shift. How can they expect to replace the dominant theory if they can't define their own borders?
That is exactly why overcoming this theoretical crisis is not guaranteed. The lack of a single unified definition makes communication between scholars incredibly muddy.
I bet.
Because the field pulls from biology, history, sociology, and economics, it is inherently interdisciplinary, which is wonderfully rich, but structurally, it's very messy.
Right.
It is much harder to win an academic turf war or, influence global policy when the foundational definitions of your own movement are still the subject of fierce internal debate.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It really shows that changing a scientific paradigm is this messy human process fraught with academic turf wars, not just pure logic.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have this messy, fragmented, but highly realistic framework for studying the economy. Let's transition a bit.
Sure.
Let's move from how we study the economy to what is actually happening inside of it.
Okay.
If the economy is a mutating ecosystem, how does that mutation actually unfold? Does it just slowly creep forward day by day with tiny incremental changes? Or does it happen in massive bursts?
Well, according to chapter 2 of the book, it happens in massive, earth-shattering waves.
Massive waves. Okay.
Yeah. To understand this mechanism, we have to look at the concept of long waves. This was originally proposed by the Russian economist Nikolai Kondratiev.
Kondratiev, right.
And then we look at how Joseph Schumpeter later connected those waves directly to technological innovation in his work on business cycles.
So Schumpeter didn't see capitalism as just a steady upward climb.
No, not at all. He identified three massive, distinct cycles of capitalist development.
What were they?
First, the original Industrial Revolution, which was driven by early mechanization.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, the era of steam power and steel. And third, the era of electricity, chemistry, and internal combustion motors.
And the research didn't just freeze in Schumpeter's era, right? Because the text digs into the neo-Schumpeterian view, too.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Authors like Christopher Freeman and Carlota Perez took Schumpeter's foundational idea that innovation drives the economy and expanded it significantly.
How so?
While they mapped out four distinct technological revolutions up to 1988, and then Perez, in 2010, systematically defined five complete technological revolutions.
5 of them. But I want to understand the actual mechanics of a wave here. It isn't just someone inventing a steam engine and suddenly the whole world changes overnight. How does a wave actually crest and fall?
The mechanics involve a pretty predictable cycle of boom, bust, and assimilation.
Okay, walk me through that.
According to these frameworks, a wave begins with an eruption, a major technological breakthrough.
Right.
This is followed by a frenzy phase, where financial capital recognizes the potential and rushes in, creating a massive speculative bubble.
Oh, like the railway maybe in the 19th century or the dot-com bubble in the late 90s?
Exactly like those. Eventually, that financial bubble bursts, and the crash forces a painful restructuring of the economy.
So things have to break before they get fixed.
Yes. Only after that crash do you enter the synergy and maturity phases. That's where the technology actually spreads out, integrates deeply into everyday life, and becomes the new normal.
And then what?
Finally, the technology exhausts its potential for massive new growth, stagnation sets in, and the system becomes ripe for the next wave to erupt.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me.
Yeah.
When you look back at history with, centuries of hindsight, it's very easy to draw a circle around a bunch of chaotic events, financial panics, and new inventions, and just call it a neat wave.
It does look very tidy in retrospect.
Right. But are these waves an undeniable law of nature? Like, are we absolutely guaranteed a new technological revolution on a set schedule? Or is this just humans trying to force a neat pattern onto random historical events?
That is a great question. And the text explicitly highlights that exact skepticism.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, the very existence and particularly the predictable periodicity of these long waves is highly controversial.
I'm not surprised.
Kondratiev originally suggested these waves operate on massive, rhythmic, 50 or 60-year cycles.
50 or 60 years.
Yeah, but validating historical data to fit this precise chronological model is notoriously difficult.
Because the real world is messy.
Exactly. The global economy is infinitely complex, and proving empirically that it operates on an inherent rhythmic clock remains a major debate among economists.
It makes complete sense that it's controversial. It's hard to cram all of unpredictable human ingenuity, wars, and political shifts into a neat 50-year timeline.
Right.
But even if the exact timing of these waves is up for debate, something is clearly causing these massive historical shifts. I mean, we aren't still using steam engines or riding horse-drawn carriages.
Very true.
So if these waves aren't just random luck, there has to be a specific trigger. You would need an invention that doesn't just sit in one isolated industry, but bleeds into all of them. What is the engine behind a technological revolution?
That specific trigger is actually one of the most vital concepts in the entire book. It's called General Purpose Technologies, or GPTs.
GPTs, not to be confused with the AI language models we hear about today.
Right. This specific term was coined by Bresnahan and Trachtenberg back in 1995.
Okay, so what defines a GPT?
A GPT is not just an ordinary invention. To qualify as a true general-purpose technology, an innovation has to meet three very strict criteria.
Okay, what are they?
First, it must have a vast potential for application across the entire economy, not just in a single niche.
Makes sense.
Second, it must have the capacity for continuous long-term improvement. And crucially, the third criteria is deep complementarity with other innovations.
Okay, I want to make sure you, the listener, really grasp this concept because it honestly changes how you look at every piece of tech news.
It really does.
A GPT isn't just inventing a better hammer.
Right.
A better hammer makes a carpenter slightly more efficient. That's a great innovation, but it doesn't change the world.
No, it doesn't.
A GPT is inventing electricity. It doesn't just do one job better. It fundamentally changes how every single other tool in the world operates.
That is the perfect analogy.
It changes how factories are powered, how cities are lit, how human beings communicate across oceans. It is a foundational layer that thousands of other entirely new technologies get built on top of.
Exactly. And the academic frameworks detailed in the text go even deeper to explain the ripple effects of that foundational layer.
Oh, how so?
They differentiate between the technology itself and the societal shift it causes. For instance, Dosey and Nelson discuss a micro-technological paradigm
Which means what exactly?
that focuses on the specific engineering trajectories and problem-solving models of the technology itself, the
Yeah,
physical hardware, the code, that kind of thing.
got it.
But then Perez and Freeman discuss a techno-economic paradigm, and this is where the true disruption
Right,
happens.
because a techno-economic paradigm isn't just the physical microchip or the steam engine. It's the sudden, forced shift in how society reorganizes around that technology.
Yes.
It's the new business models, the new management styles, the new financial regulations, and the entire new infrastructure required to just make the tech work.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this expansive, all-encompassing nature is exactly why general-purpose technologies are so incredibly difficult to analyze.
I can see that.
The text points this out as the ultimate challenge for future research. Because a GPT is so widely diffused and inherently complementary to millions of other processes across every sector, isolating and measuring its true economic and social impact is just incredibly complex.
It's like trying to measure the impact of something that touches literally everything.
Exactly. Traditional economic metrics, which are looking for immediate linear cause and effect, they often fail completely to capture those massive indirect effects.
If a technology touches the factories, the supply chains, the cities, and the laws, how do you even measure it? It feels like trying to measure the impact of oxygen on a living organism.
That's a great way to put it. And this leads to a brilliant, counterintuitive insight from the source material.
Oh, I love these. Let's hear it.
You would naturally assume that the moment a world-changing GPT is introduced, economic productivity would immediately skyrocket, right?
Yeah, of course. You get a better tool, you work faster.
But the text notes that when a new GPT arrives, productivity might actually drop initially.
Wait, really? It goes down.
Yes. The initial drop in productivity is a profound phenomenon. And the friction isn't in inventing the technology. The friction is in society unlearning the old paradigm.
Okay, I need an example of this.
Let's look at the historical transition from steam power to electricity in manufacturing.
Okay.
When electric motors first became available, factory owners simply ripped out their massive central steam engines and replaced them with one giant electric motor.
Makes sense on paper.
Right, but they kept the exact same inefficient system of belts and pulleys running through the whole factory. Because they were using the new technology inside the old paradigm, productivity actually stalled.
Oh, wow. So they just swapped the engine but kept the whole messy infrastructure.
Exactly. It took decades for managers to realize that electricity allowed them to put a small, independent motor on every individual machine. That realization required completely redesigning the factory floor, changing the workflows, and retraining the workers. Only after that painful reorganization did the massive productivity gains finally appear.
That is the crucial aha moment right there. The delay happens because everyone is scrambling to force the new technology to play by the old rules.
Yes.
The entire ecosystem has to mutate, which is messy, expensive, and chaotic. You have to literally tear down the old factory to build a new one.
And this synthesizes the core connection between the two chapters of the book perfectly.
Bring it all together for us.
Chapter 1 introduces us to evolutionary economics. It tears down the old static idea of a perfectly balanced market and replaces it with a framework of constant change, uncertainty, and disequilibrium.
Right.
That evolutionary framework is absolutely necessary to understand Chapter 2. You simply cannot comprehend the massive, disruptive, world-altering waves caused by general-purpose technologies if your foundational economic model expects everything to always return to a quiet, harmonious equilibrium.
It just doesn't compute.
The traditional mathematical model breaks when confronted with a technology that forces the entire global economy to painstakingly rewire itself. Evolutionary economics gives us the lens to actually see the waves, the crashes, and the slow, difficult process of assimilation.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? It means we need better intellectual tools to navigate a world that is constantly being overwritten by the next big idea. We simply cannot rely on maps that assume the terrain never changes.
Very well said.
And that brings us to a final thought for you, pulling directly from the broader implications and the discussion questions posed in our source material.
It's a big one.
We are arguably living through the early, turbulent stages of a massive paradigm shift right now. Whether it is driven by artificial intelligence, advanced biotechnology, or renewable energy grids, a new general-purpose technology is bleeding into every sector of the economy.
It's happening as we speak.
Exactly. Think about your own industry, your job, and your daily life. How do you think companies and the people making public policy should deal with the massive, inescapable uncertainty that comes with these technological transformations?
Because the ecosystem is mutating.
The old factories are being torn down. When the next technological wave truly hits the shore, will we be ready to ride the chaos of a new techno-economic paradigm? Or will we be standing on the beach, clutching our old static textbooks, stubbornly expecting the water to stay perfectly still?